Hey there, it's Miss E, your favorite loaf baker. I am coming to you today to continue the story of how I got started back in 2008. It was started in early 2008 with doing the loaves, known as Glory Loaves. I mentioned that I had a location where everything started, which was at the bookstore that was in the church I attended. And at the time, it was the Word Church. That happens to be a very large church that's here in Northeast Ohio. And the assistant pastor that had helped me out at the time come up with the name and everything, he put it in the bookstore at the time. So that's how it got started. And it started from 16 mini loaves in there that went in there once a week. And then as things caught on, and then of course we had multiple services. So you figure if you got Wednesday, both noonday and 7 o'clock in the evening, you got Saturday evening service, you got Sunday three services going on, and then any other activities that may happen during the week that did require the bookstore to be open. My loaves got a chance to be sold, and when they had big events like Gathering of the Shepherds, things increased even more. So over the years, it started out and then it just slowly grew over a 7 year run. And I was very grateful that, for the change that happened with the different people who oversaw the bookstore and everything, they were able to keep the lows in because they were doing well and everything. But, let's say after a while, as it changed for the last hand, things changed because of how they were trying to set up and change the look of the bookstore and the purpose of it and everything else. But I could appreciate for the 7 years that I had and how things grew and what I learned from the experience in doing everything. Now, what was good that came from it was one of the ladies that worked in the bookstore, or volunteered in the bookstore, I should say. She also owned a store that was not far from the church, and her name was Miss Romay. And she came to me knowing that the Lowe's, well, it just happened to be we had a conversation shortly before we knew the Lowe's were going to be coming out of the bookstore. She wanted me to put them in her store because she owned a store and a beauty salon. She owns a store and a beauty salon. And so she put them in the store, or I guess between the store and the books and the salon. Not sure what she did with them. All I know is I dropped them off. So she had them there, and then slowly but surely things caught on to where other people would either come to me and suggest a location, which was how I got into Gimme Java and Cafe Fix. When Cafe Fix was in South Euclid, Gimme Java was in Shaker right off of Lee Road in Van Aiken, because it came from me networking with a woman, and we became friends. And she suggested that I reach out to these two other black business owners and suggest my product. And I did. And when I went to Jackie at Coffee Cafe Fix, she also, and we ended up collaborating to create what was called Coffee and Conversation, because she was looking at the time to create more traffic and a following at her coffee shop because she had just taken it over from another business. And so she was trying to create her own following and branding and that sort. And so her and I partnered with that. So we had both the bread and what will become a monthly event at her location. Um, and if and I could alternate between her location and even Gimme Java at different times, and it worked out to be good. It was a very good relationship on both ends, and I was able to stay at both of their shops until they either sold or closed their business, depending on what case was, because both of them had two different instances. But they still had a good long run, um, and I could appreciate that. And then with Fawaki Burst, if you're familiar, he is a local smoothie juice bar and cafe, and he had what was then one location also in, at the time it was in South Euclid, and he also had a location that he was opening in Cleveland Heights, and then he later expanded to Beechwood. Now when he was at the South Euclid location, I ended up talking to him because I did a pop-up there, and I happened to be on the phone with one of my former coworkers who we became friends, and he suggested that I ask about it being there, and I hadn't thought about it, but I was like, okay, I can ask. So I went to Muhammad, who was the owner, and I asked him about, because he had already come over and inquired about the bread when I was setting up and everything to see what I had. And so when he came, I went to him afterwards and I was like, would you be interested in having my loaves as an offer in your store? And he said, sure. He didn't hesitate or anything. He was like, sure. We This came up with the options that the customers would have. And then later, he suggested within that conversation, he said, well, he said, would you consider making them vegan? And I was like, no, I hadn't thought about that. I said, but what would it take to make them vegan? And he said, well, you use coconut milk. And I was like, well, where would I get it from? And he brings out this big can of coconut milk. And he hands it to me and he was like, here. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'll go figure it out and make it work. And within a couple of weeks, I had created the recipe and did a tasting at the store. He was actually the first to taste it. And there is a video of that on my Facebook page that highlights that when he did it. And it was so cool. It was a very genuine experience that he did. From tasting it to also picking up the other samples that were on the table at the same time. So that was in 2019. Yeah, 2019, January, February 2019. So that was pretty cool. So unfortunately, it's been around ever since. So, and that part of the additional menu items, that'll be in a later story. But back to the location. So Mohammed grew to have 4 locations around the city. It was 55th, Beechwood, Cleveland Heights, and South Euclid. South Euclid was the main store, and the other 3 were the other new and up and coming stores. And then he later opened up a location in Florida. And that was in 2020 while all 4 were running at the same time. So that became a great thing. February 2020, I was approached when I had a kiosk at Richmond Mall by a guy. His name is Ron. He was one of the mall walkers. Now, if you're familiar with Richmond Mall in Northeast Ohio, it was a local mall that at this point had gone through a lot of changes and stuff, and it was slowly but surely, I guess you can say, shutting down because a lot of the stores were moving out, but the rumors were that someone was buying up the location, but things hadn't been solidified yet, so they still had businesses in there. And myself and a few other entrepreneurs were given an opportunity in October of 2019 to have a 6-month contract, which gave us through the holidays to not only increase traffic for them, but it was also a chance to gain exposure and things for us. So that worked out for me to have a kiosk there. So he was a regular mall walker. And so he came up to me one day in February. Now, he had been walking for a while, and I would see him and just speak as he walked by. No big thing. And so he comes up to me one day and he was like, do you make the banana nut and or the zucchini bread in mini loaves? And at the time I didn't. I just had them as the half loaves, which are slightly bigger. And he was like, well, if you could do that, he was like, I have an opportunity for you. He said, because I have some locations, because the baker that they had, she had a house fire or something that happened. And so after everything got redone, she decided she didn't want to do it anymore. And so he was like, it would be a weekly thing that we would do. And I thought about it and I was like, okay, well, we can. If this is going to be a weekly thing, sure. So we began close to the end of February and we've been going ever since. So we're talking about 4 years now that we've been pretty much going strong, restocking what I later found to be, which were several locations along the Lakeshore area. And because I didn't know for a while where these loaves were going. And for me, it really didn't matter, because my thought process is, when you buy them from me, what you do with them afterwards, it's not really my concern. I just refill the order as you ask me to. So when I say I supply upon demand without judgment, I mean that all the way around. Okay. So that was that. So other locations that have come about usually came by somebody's suggestion and or me just having a genuine conversation with somebody based on the location. So if somebody suggested, I would go and ask, we would have the conversation. If it worked to be a good match. And for me, that usually meant that the owner had a level of enthusiasm and interest in the product, because what I come to find out is that My product is not something I'm going to force on anybody. You either are on board right on top, or it just might be the best time for us to fit together, and that's okay. Um, it works when it works, and we'll go from there. And so, as things are working now, where we are, I am still looking to do some other things and grow as I need to, and still being able to maintain a good flow at the end of the day and continue to build the relationships, which I will be discussing in another video soon as well. So the key to expanding into locations comes down to communication, networking, and building relationships. All very important, especially in the role of an entrepreneur. And of course, you can always place an order and have it individually. And at one point, too, because of another networking group that I'm a part of, because she has her own directory and stuff, and she's creating a community of networking entrepreneurs. Her business called actually Black Connections, and she's a wonderful woman who's all about trying to keep everybody together and help grow everyone's networking business. So she happened to be posting one day on one of her Saturday connecting days, Small Business Saturday, and another woman who lives in Chicago, I believe it was, she had a kiosk as well, and she wanted to have another product in her store. So I shipped it to her, and she was able to sell it while she was there. And she began making some different transitions and stuff like that. So we didn't get to continue that for long, but the fact that it was an option that had occurred and it happened is great. And I also have connected with a couple of other businesses here and there along the way, also including one that's in Columbus. They have a boat. So one of my good friends, her sister and husband, have a boat that they take out on the water in Columbus every year, during the boating season, and they have people on board, and they now give my Loaves as a treat on the boat, and the people love them. So it works. It's a beautiful thing. So I can always appreciate working with people that love to have my bread, that want to sell the bread, all the things, or give it away. Either way, again, at the end of the day, that's not my business. Oh, and I also had a couple of laundromats because a gentleman had reached out to me one time through social media, reached out and said he wanted to provide them to his customers at the laundromat. And he had a couple of laundromat locations around the city. And we did that for a couple of years. So I have been very grateful to have worked with a lot of different people on a regular basis, spreading the love of the Loaves around the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. Love it. So again, thank you. And until the next one, talk to you soon. Bye.